Rescued German Shepherd leads a blind woman to safety, the heartwarming moment you'll never forget. They say that some bonds are forged by fate in moments when hope feels distant and hearts feel broken. This is the story of one such bond between a brave, rescued German Shepherd and a determined woman living in darkness. Her world was one without shapes or colors, yet her spirit glimmered with unstoppable resilience. When she needed a guide and companion the most, life introduced her to a remarkable dog with a past as wounded as her own. Against all odds, they found each other and faced the shadows of uncertainty with unwavering courage, proving that, together, they could conquer anything. Marianne's earliest memory was a swirl of soft voices and muted steps echoing across polished floors. It was the day she realized she could not see like other children. Before that moment, she had assumed the entire world existed in that strange, dark tapestry that she had come to think of as normal. She remembered reaching out her little hand, hoping for a father's reassuring grip or a mother's soothing embrace, and instead encountering the sterile smoothness of a hospital bed's metal railing. It was in the children's wing of the pediatric hospital in Newark, New Jersey, that doctors confirmed she had been blind since birth due to a rare congenital condition that prevented proper development of her optic nerves. Yet, in the absence of light, Marianne discovered a deep well of insight that glowed within her soul. As she grew older, she nurtured her other senses, her hearing, which could pick up the faintest rustle of leaves in the wind, her sense of touch, which let her detect subtle variations in the environment, from the coolness of a marble floor to the roughness of a wooden table, and her sense of smell, which was attuned to the aroma of fresh bread baking 2 doors down her block. Marianne's mother would often take her hand and guide her around their snug living room, describing each piece of furniture, each painting on the wall, each family photo in painstaking detail, as though transferring a mental picture directly into her daughter's mind. In school, Marianne's teachers marveled at her determination. Other students might whisper or stare, some from curiosity and some from cruelty, but she held her head high. She used a cane by the time she was 6. On the playground, she was cautious but not withdrawn. She learned the location of the swings by counting steps, memorizing the faint squeaks of the metal chains. She learned the sidewalk cracks and lumps on her route home. Everywhere she went, she carried an aura of gentle resilience, an air of someone determined to conquer obstacles that she believed were mere speed bumps on her journey, rather than life-defining barriers. As Marianne reached adulthood, she enrolled in classes for independent living skills, learned Braille fluently, and graduated high school with honors. She received acceptance into a specialized vocational program for the visually impaired, focusing on administrative work and phone communication. She practiced working with computers equipped with screen readers, discovered the intricate world of adaptive technology, and dreamed of living a self-reliant life. Even though her parents offered unwavering support, she longed for something more, something that went beyond a job or a mere sense of independence. She wanted companionship, a bond that could guide her not only physically but emotionally as well. That wish led her to consider a guide dog. She had grown up in a quiet household without pets, her mother being allergic to most animal dander. But Marianne had always felt a strange fascination with dogs, especially those big, confident breeds like German Shepherds. Perhaps it was their upright ears, proud posture, and quiet intelligence that beckoned to her. She read about guide dog organizations across the country and began to think of how her life might change if she had a 4-legged companion by her side. Little did she know, the universe would answer her silent plea in an unexpected way, uniting her path with that of a very special rescued German Shepherd who was in as much need of love as she was. The day she found him, or rather, the day he found her, was both ordinary and extraordinary. She had just turned 25 and, with the moral support of her close friend Natalia, began the paperwork at the Seeing Eye in Morristown, New Jersey. She wanted a guide dog trained and accredited by a reputable organization. But sometimes, life's greatest gifts come unplanned, bypassing official avenues, and choose us in the most astonishing moments of vulnerability. In that turn of fate, Marianne's life would never be the same again. Miles away from where Marianne lived, a German shepherd named Rocco roamed the outskirts of a small industrial area near Newark, an area dotted with old warehouses and abandoned lots. He had once belonged to a family that lived in a cramped apartment. As a puppy, he experienced fleeting moments of warmth, chewing on old tennis balls and falling asleep on a thin rug. But family disputes, combined with financial strain, had led to neglect, and eventually, one fateful day, his owners drove him to a remote spot and left him there. For weeks, Rocco survived on scraps and the occasional kindness of strangers who fed him leftover sandwich crusts or offered him water from a battered plastic bowl. Physically, Rocco was a fine specimen of a German shepherd, strong, agile, with keen eyes and a proud stance. Emotionally, though, he was scarred. Abandonment left him fearful of trusting anyone fully. Day after day he combed the streets, seeking a place where he might not freeze at night or starve during the day. He soon found a derelict warehouse with broken windows and a half-collapsed roof, a labyrinth of corridors where old boxes and rusting machinery were scattered in the dust. No one cared to maintain this deserted property, and it became Rocco's refuge. At first, he felt safe, though always on guard. The nights were long and filled with howling winds that echoed across corrugated metal beams. Sometimes, local teenagers wandered inside, exploring, causing mischief, or filming themselves for online videos. Rocco would hide, trembling and watchful, ready to flee at any sign of threat. His ribs started to show beneath his thick fur. His water supply was inconsistent. Infection threatened when he cut his paw on broken glass. Life was a precarious balance between fear and resilience. Still, something in Rocco's canine heart refused to yield to despair. There was an unspoken yearning for connection, for a gentle hand, a soft voice, a home that might welcome him for who he was. Eventually, fate brought an animal rescue volunteer named Kevin to the warehouse. Kevin was part of a local organization that scouted abandoned structures, searching for stray dogs and cats. The rescue group, affiliated with the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals ASPCA, received tip-offs from local residents about barking in the building. One chilly morning, Kevin entered the warehouse with slow, deliberate steps, scanning the shadows for any movement. He found Rocco curled behind a stack of grimy wooden pallets, exhausted and nearly out of hope. Kevin knelt down, speaking softly, inching forward with an open can of dog food. The unmistakable smell of meaty meal reached Rocco, and though his instinct told him to flee, he sensed no aggression in this stranger's tone. Hunger overcame distrust. Little by little, Rocco emerged, eyes wary, ears flattened. Kevin gently placed the can on the concrete floor and stepped back, letting the German shepherd approach in his own time. For the first time in weeks, Rocco ate without the dread of being chased or harmed. He did not know it yet, but this rescue volunteer had just offered him his first step toward a life of safety and love. In the days that followed, Kevin returned regularly, bringing more food and a portable water bowl. He gained Rocco's cautious acceptance, eventually slipping a soft slip lead around his neck. With empathy guiding his hands, Kevin led Rocco out of that cold, desolate warehouse and into a rescue van. As the engine started, Rocco looked back at the building that had sheltered him. A swirl of fear and relief coursed through him. Whatever lay ahead, the dusty remains of his old life faded behind him in the rearview mirror. After a thorough veterinary evaluation, Rocco was taken to a local animal shelter that partnered with the ASPCA. The building was a cacophony of barks, whines, and meows echoing off the walls. Rows of kennels lined the halls, each holding a furry resident waiting, yearning, or perhaps not even hoping anymore for a home. The staff members were overworked but dedicated. They bathed Rocco, treated his injuries, and noted the slight limp from the paw he had injured on broken glass. Adjusting to the shelter environment proved taxing for Rocco. He had grown accustomed to solitude, so the bustle, the bright lights, and the unfamiliar voices put him on edge. Dogs barked incessantly. Volunteers bustled in and out, and potential adopters walked the corridors peering into kennels. Rocco spent much of his time lying on the concrete floor, ears perked, waiting for any sign of threat. Whenever staff approached to feed him or to take him outside for exercise, he maintained a wary stance. Yet a glimmer of trust, established with Kevin, began to show. He no longer bared his teeth or tried to bolt. Instead, he watched, uncertain but curious, letting them handle him gently, coaxing him to see that not all humans were cruel. Weeks passed, and a transformation began. Rocco put on weight. His coat turned glossy and thick, shining like black and tan silk under the fluorescent lights. Slowly, the staff recognized that Rocco was not just another stray with trust issues. He was exceptionally intelligent. He learned commands quickly, responded to changes in routine, and displayed uncanny perception of emotional cues. When a timid shelter worker approached, Rocco would greet them with a subdued tail wag, as if sensing their nerves. When Kevin came by, Rocco would let out an excited bark and jump a little on his hind legs, tail wagging vigorously, a sign of the affection he had learned to show. As Rocco's true nature emerged, the shelter staff realized that a typical home adoption might not fully harness his potential. They considered contacting specialized training programs for working dogs, such as search and rescue or Police 9 units. But Rocco's initial fear response and uncertain background gave them pause. His journey might require a gentler, more rehabilitative environment before he could undertake the rigors of service. It was around this time that a local volunteer named Sarah, who also supported the Seeing Eye in Morristown, visited the shelter to evaluate rescue dogs that might be suitable for therapy work. She spent time in the yard, observing how Rocco interacted with other dogs, and took him for a walk, noticing the keen way he navigated around obstacles. Even though Rocco had his anxieties, he displayed an almost preternatural attentiveness to Sarah's pace, stopping when she hesitated, offering a reassuring presence. Sarah wrote extensive notes about him, describing his sensitivity, intelligence, and the intriguing calm he showed when someone was anxious or vulnerable. She filed these observations into a recommended list of dogs that might excel in specialized training should the right caretaker appear. Meanwhile, Marianne's life was moving forward, though not quite as smoothly as she had hoped. She continued her application process with the Seeing Eye, but there was a waiting list for a German Shepherd. The trainers and administrators were thorough in matching each dog to a potential owner, ensuring the pairing was beneficial and safe. Marianne, ever patient, filled her time working at a small non-profit. Her primary duty was to answer phone calls, help with light administrative tasks, and organize digital spreadsheets via screen reader technology. She excelled at her job, and her co-workers appreciated her calm, gentle nature. Yet a restlessness simmered within her. She knew that a guide dog would grant her a whole new realm of independence, allow her to stride confidently down sidewalks, cross streets with a sense of security, and even travel to new places without feeling so reliant on others. She yearned for the kind of companionship that only a devoted, well-trained dog could give. One day, while riding in the passenger seat of her friend Natalia's car, Marianne expressed how the waiting list for a German Shepherd was longer than she'd anticipated. Natalia was silent for a moment, then mentioned that she had heard about a local rescue center that occasionally connected with the Seeing Eye for potential therapy or service dogs. They have a dog there, a German Shepherd, that Sarah was raving about, Natalia said. Apparently, he's shown remarkable intelligence and empathy. I know you want an officially trained dog, but maybe we should at least find out more. You never know, it might be worth checking if they can accelerate or collaborate on training. Marianne felt a spark of curiosity. She had always trusted Natalia's instincts, and the woman had a knack for steering her toward promising opportunities. A week later, after some calls and arrangements, Marianne and Natalia visited the rescue shelter. For Marianne, the shelter was an overwhelming place. Echoing barks reverberated through the halls, each one distinct in pitch and urgency. Natalia guided her gently by the elbow, describing the layout, the signage on the walls, and the dogs they passed. When they reached Rocco's kennel, Marianne noted a sudden hush, as if the dog sensed her presence from behind the metal bars. She listened to Rocco's soft panting and felt him step closer to the front of the enclosure, pressing his muzzle against the chain-link barrier. "This is Rocco," said Kevin, who happened to be walking by and recognized Natalia from a previous conversation. "He was in terrible shape when we found him, but he's come a long way. He's a very special boy." Marianne let Natalia guide her hand to the fence. Slowly, she extended her fingers, waiting for Rocco's reaction. The moment Rocco's warm nose and whiskers brushed against her palm, Marianne felt a jolt of something she couldn't quite describe, like a gentle electric current of hope passing between them. He gave the softest little lick on her fingers, then pressed his cheek against the fence, as though inviting her to pet him. For an instant, all the noise and chaos in the shelter receded. Marianne felt only the rhythmic pulse of her heart, the timbre of Rocco's breath, and the shared sense of uncertainty that hovered in that moment. She recognized a longing in that dog's presence, a question that seemed to hang in the air. Will you trust me, and can I trust you? After that initial meeting, Marianne couldn't get Rocco out of her mind. She found herself replaying the moment when his muzzle touched her hand. It was so simple, yet so profound, the gentleness of that large, powerful dog, the subtle shift of energy that passed between them. She spoke to Natalia about it, wondering if she was imagining something that wasn't really there. Natalia, however, had seen the brightness in Marianne's face and the calm in Rocco's eyes when they connected. She was convinced that this was more than a passing impression. Conversations with the shelter staff revealed that, while Rocco had the intelligence and temperament for service work, he would need specialized training. This training could be costly, and the time frame uncertain. Still, it was possible that with a dedicated trainer and Marianne's willingness, Rocco could become a companion dog, possibly even a guide dog with the correct support and certifications. Marianne felt torn. She was already on a waiting list for a dog from the Seeing Eye, which guaranteed a fully trained guide. Taking on Rocco would be an act of faith, requiring time, financial resources, and a leap of trust in an uncertain outcome. But her heart kept returning to that gentle muzzle against her fingers. She scheduled another visit, this time in a quieter environment, a small fenced yard behind the shelter, where potential adopters could spend more relaxed, private time with the dogs. Kevin brought Rocco out on a leash, and Natalia led Marianne to a bench in the corner. Marianne sat down, tapping the seat lightly to familiarize herself with its contours. Rocco approached slowly, as though respecting her space. He sniffed her legs, her hands, and her cane, then rested his chin on her knee. Marianne listened carefully to the rustle of his fur and felt the weight of his breath as he exhaled. She moved her hand gently from the top of his head down to his neck, feeling the shape of his ears, the softness around his cheeks. Rocco was trembling slightly, either from excitement or nervousness. She couldn't say which, but she spoke to him quietly, letting him know that he was safe in her presence. The caretaker had also brought a harness, just a simple walking harness, to see if Rocco would respond to any basic commands from Marianne. They guided her on how to position her hands, how to give a clear, calm vocal cue. To everyone's surprise and delight, Rocco picked up her signals quickly. When she said, "Rocco, come," his ears perked and he moved toward her. When she said, "Rocco, sit," he lowered his hindquarters, albeit hesitantly, as though waiting for praise or a treat. The staff present marveled at his attentiveness to Marianne's voice, as though he understood he had to be extra mindful. By the end of that session, Marianne was flooded with a deep sense of possibility. Here was this dog who had endured abandonment, hunger, and fear, yet still reached out with an almost intuitive empathy. And here was she, a woman who had traversed life without the ability to see the world's colors and shapes, yearning for the independence and companionship a guide dog could offer. The rescue staff hinted at an unspoken belief that this might very well be the partnership Rocco was waiting for. Marianne's parents, while supportive, voiced concerns about the responsibilities involved in training a dog from scratch, especially one with a troubled past. They worried about potential behavioral issues, about Rocco's readiness to guide someone who was blind, about vet bills and advanced training costs. Marianne understood their concerns. She had her own worries. How much time could she dedicate to training while working full-time? Would she find a guide dog, certified trainer who could help Rocco transition into a seeing eye companion? Yet the pull she felt toward Rocco was undeniable. She spent sleepless nights considering the pros and cons. She even dreamt of him once or twice, imagining him by her side, leading her across a quiet street, or resting his head on her lap in a cozy living room. Each day, she found herself talking to Natalia and other close friends about the potential adoption, seeking wisdom and reassurance. Some warned it might be too big a task, especially since Marianne's safety was paramount and working with an uncertified dog carried risks. Others felt that with the right resources and patience, she could forge a life-changing bond that no official waiting list could replicate. The shelter's trainer arranged for Marianne to have more sessions with Rocco, each one more illuminating than the last. Rocco demonstrated a gentle willingness to learn. He was protective of Marianne, subtly positioning himself near her legs when unfamiliar people approached. Remarkably, he began to adapt to her pace and seemed aware of her cane, moving in a way that minimized tangling. It was nothing formal or polished like a professionally trained guide dog, but it was the seed of something promising. One evening, Marianne sat with Natalia in her small apartment, going over her finances, making calls to various dog trainers. They stumbled upon a name that repeatedly came up as a recommended freelance instructor for advanced obedience and potential service dog training. Daniel Wright, a former police 9 handler who had shifted to working with therapy and service dogs after retiring from the force. He was local, had reasonable rates, and came highly praised for his calm, adaptive training methods. Without hesitation, Marianne dialed his number. After a brief introduction, Daniel agreed to meet her and Rocco at the shelter for an evaluation. Daniel Wright was a tall, broad-shouldered man in his 50s, with a confident yet patient demeanor. He had served in the 9 unit for nearly 2 decades, working with German Shepherds, Belgian Malinois, and other breeds in high-pressure environments. After retirement, he found a second calling in helping dogs transition into therapy and service roles. Something about guiding these animals to help humans in need resonated deeply with him, perhaps. It was the memory of the strong bonds he had formed with his own 9 partners over the years. When Daniel arrived at the shelter, Marianne could sense his presence immediately. He had a calm, measured step. She could almost feel the air shift around him, as though the dogs quieted out of respect for a familiar authority. Kevin led Rocco out. The German shepherd's tail wagged hesitantly. Daniel crouched, letting Rocco sniff his hands. He ruffled the dog's ears and studied his posture, noting any signs of anxiety or aggression. Then he straightened up, turning his attention to Marianne. "You must be Marianne," Daniel said, his voice a warm baritone. "I've heard good things about both of you. So let's see how we can help." Marianne introduced herself, explained her background, her blindness, and her hopes for adopting Rocco as her guide dog or at least a companion with some specialized training. Daniel asked pointed questions about her lifestyle. Did she walk a lot in the city? Was her neighborhood busy with traffic? Did she travel frequently on public transportation? Marianne answered honestly, describing her day-to-day routine, her job, and her limited but existent independence. She admitted that she wanted to expand that independence and explore the world more freely. Then came the assessment. Daniel observed how Rocco responded to basic commands. He tested the dog's reaction to mild distractions, a ball thrown nearby, a volunteer walking past them with another dog. Rocco's gaze flicked to the distractions, but returned to focus on Marianne whenever she spoke or gently patted her thigh. It was a good sign. Daniel asked Marianne to walk with Rocco on a leash in a contained area, using verbal cues to have him stop or sit when necessary. Though Rocco was not perfect, he was attentive and seemed keen to understand what was expected. "His attention on Marianne is impressive," Daniel remarked to Kevin and Natalia. "He's cautious by nature, understandable, given his background, but that caution can be trained into heightened awareness. That's valuable for someone who needs a guide." Still, Daniel made no promises. He explained the rigorous path ahead, advanced obedience classes, socializing in different environments, specialized guide dog tasks, such as leading around obstacles, halting at curbs, ignoring food scraps on the sidewalk, and responding to traffic cues. The process could take months, if not a year, before they could safely say Rocco was a reliable guide. Marianne, though overwhelmed, felt a steady resolve build within her. She had always faced challenges step by step. Here was another journey that might demand equal parts resilience and love. When Daniel asked her if she was prepared to commit, her voice wavered with emotion but remained firm. "I've never wanted anything more," she said. Rocco, sensing her determination, rested his head lightly on her leg, almost as if giving his silent approval. The day Marianne officially adopted Rocco was a flurry of paperwork, tears, and wagging tails. The shelter staff who had grown attached to him gathered around, taking photos and offering well wishes. Kevin, who had first rescued Rocco from the abandoned warehouse, gave Marianne a collar with a small engraved tag that read Rocco, and below it, "Forever Loved." Marianne's parents attended the adoption as well, though they still harbored cautious reservations. Seeing their daughter's joy eased their worries. They watched as Rocco stood calmly beside her, occasionally glancing up at her face when she talked, as if comprehending her every word. Natalia, ever the supportive friend, had helped Marianne puppy-proof her apartment, securing wires, placing non-slip mats in areas with smooth tile, and creating a comfy nook where Rocco's bed, toys, and water bowl would be. When they arrived at Marianne's apartment, she guided Rocco around each room, letting him sniff and familiarize himself with the furniture layout. She introduced him to his bed, coaxing him to lie down and get comfortable. Despite the new environment, Rocco handled the transition smoothly, though he did circle the living room multiple times. His ears perked, checking for potential dangers. Soon enough, he seemed to realize that this place was safe, quiet, and filled with welcoming voices. Marianne's sense of relief was immense. The journey to get here had been emotional and fraught with uncertainties, but now Rocco's presence grounded her. She could feel his warmth and energy, soothing her anxieties about their future training. She knelt on the floor, running her hands through his thick fur. He leaned into her, eyes half closed, as if savoring the moment of finally belonging somewhere. They practiced small routines from day one. Marianne would command sit before feeding him, wait before opening the door to take him outside. Rocco responded with attentiveness that grew sharper each day. Daniel had asked them to start with simple, consistent commands, building trust and establishing Marianne as Rocco's primary handler. Each success, no matter how minor, felt like a triumph. Each challenge was an opportunity to reinforce their bond. The nights brought a special comfort. Marianne would settle on her couch, reading Braille books or listening to audio recordings, and Rocco would lie at her feet or rest his chin on her lap. The occasional soft whine from him signaled a desire for attention, which she happily provided with a scratch behind his ears. In these calm evenings, Marianne sometimes found herself smiling, tears of gratitude pressing at her eyes, as she thought of where Rocco might have been if they hadn't found each other, and where she might still be if her path had not converged with his. Despite the sweetness of their bond, the training process was no easy road. Daniel established a schedule, multiple sessions each week focusing on Rocco's responsiveness to guide specific commands. They practiced forward, halt, left, right, reinforcing them with gentle tugs of a specialized harness. They also worked on ignoring distractions, which meant exposing Rocco to busier streets, noisy markets, and unpredictable crowds. It was during these outings that Marianne's nerves sometimes got the better of her. Though Rocco was making progress, he wasn't yet a fully trained guide dog. He would occasionally pause too abruptly or become momentarily fixated on a stray cat crossing their path. Once, while trying to lead Marianne around a construction zone, he hesitated, causing her to stumble slightly and graze her knee on a protruding pipe. Daniel and Natalia rushed to assist, but it was Rocco who showed the most distress, pacing in circles, whining softly, as though apologizing for his mistake. Marianne consoled him, letting her hands run soothingly over his fur. She wanted him to know that she understood learning was a process. More than that, she wanted to reassure herself as well. This was not the seamless, guaranteed outcome she might have had if she waited for an officially trained dog, but it was their journey, unique and uncharted. Marianne had never been one to shy away from a challenge, and it was that grit, coupled with Rocco's unwavering loyalty, that carried them through each obstacle. Daniel reminded Marianne to remain calm and consistent. Rocco fed off her energy. If she became too anxious, he might mirror her tension. He taught her techniques to steady her breathing, to give commands in a firm yet compassionate tone, and to always praise Rocco when he performed well. Slowly, Rocco's confidence grew. He learned that a misstep did not mean condemnation, only a prompt correction and another chance to succeed. As the weeks turned into months, small victories began to pile up. Rocco learned to stop at curbs, waiting until Marianne gave him the cue to move forward. He became less reactive to other dogs, focusing instead on Marianne's voice. On one memorable day, Daniel took them to a busy city block and had Marianne direct Rocco through a labyrinth of pedestrians, newspaper stands, and parked bicycles. She gripped the harness handle, occasionally telling Rocco to halt or left. Despite the noise and commotion, Rocco navigated carefully, guiding Marianne away from obstacles. Afterward, Marianne felt a euphoric sense of achievement, as though she had just run a marathon. She knelt and hugged Rocco, letting him lick her cheek. It was a powerful affirmation that their hard work was paying off. Beyond the structured training sessions, Marianne and Rocco developed a profound emotional bond in their day-to-day life. Morning started with Marianne pouring kibble into his bowl, greeting him with a softly spoken, "Good morning, buddy," to which Rocco responded by wagging his tail and nuzzling her hand. She would then get ready for work, and if Natalia or her parents couldn't drive her, she'd practice short, familiar routes on foot with Rocco, maybe just a walk to a nearby cafe for a cup of tea or a stroll around the block. In these quieter moments, she began to rely on him not just for physical guidance, but for emotional support as well. When she felt the weight of her blindness pressing on her small moments of frustration at not being able to see a sunset or read a sign spontaneously, she'd rest her hand on Rocco's flank. He would lean into her as if to say, "You are not alone." When she sat on her couch at night, listening to the hum of city life through the window, Rocco would curl up at her feet, a steadfast presence that drove away loneliness. She also learned his quirks and preferences. He loved squeaky toys, but treated them gently, never quite ripping them apart like some dogs did. He hated the sound of vacuum cleaners, scampering into another room whenever she turned one on. His favorite spot to nap was by the window in her living room, where he could catch a warm patch of sunlight on the carpet. He had an uncanny ability to detect changes in her mood, sometimes nudging her hand when she was lost in worried thoughts. All these little details made it clear that they weren't just trainer and trainee, they were partners. In those moments, Marianne would reflect on how improbable their pairing was. One had been born into permanent darkness, while the other had been abandoned to a harsh, solitary existence. Yet, from these shattered beginnings, they were building a shared existence defined by hope and perseverance. Just when Marianne and Rocco had reached a comfortable rhythm, an unexpected phone call arrived from the Seeing Eye. A cheery administrator explained that a fully trained German Shepherd had become available for Marianne, and her name had come up on the waiting list. They were ready to arrange a meeting and, if all went well, she could bring the new guide dog home in a matter of weeks. A surge of conflicting emotions overcame Marianne. This was the call she had once prayed for, the solution that guaranteed a certified, rigorously trained partner. Yet her mind immediately flitted to Rocco, lying at her feet, dozing lightly. She felt the tether of loyalty tighten around her heart. Could she possibly replace him now, after all they had been through together? After all they had overcome? She could almost sense Rocco's presence shift, as though he felt the sudden unease that swept over her. On the other hand, a part of her worried if she was doing herself a disservice by not accepting a dog from the Seeing Eye, an opportunity that would ensure years of safe, reliable guidance. Rocco was improving, no doubt, but they still had a ways to go. She deliberated for days, confiding in Natalia, Daniel, and even her parents. Each person offered a slightly different perspective. Natalia, who had witnessed the bond between Marianne and Rocco, couldn't fathom them separating. Daniel respected the Seeing Eye, but believed that Marianne and Rocco were on the cusp of something extraordinary if they continued their training. Her parents were more torn. They respected her growing devotion to Rocco, but feared for her long-term safety and well-being. As Marianne wrestled with the decision, she found herself awake late into the night, stroking Rocco's fur while he slept soundly beside her couch. Eventually, a gentle certainty took root. The Seeing Eye's offer was incredible, but she could not walk away from Rocco, not when he had already come so far. She dialed the number the next morning, politely declining, explaining she had already adopted a dog. She was training. The representative expressed understanding, though they reminded Marianne she could still reach out if circumstances changed. After the call ended, Marianne felt a wave of tranquility wash over her. Perhaps she was swimming against the current of logic, but her heart was steadfast. Rocco was hers, and she was his. Months turned into nearly a year of steady training. Rocco learned to navigate the local streets with increasing finesse. Daniel helped them work on more complex tasks, finding specific doors or counters discerning which bus they needed at a busy station, and staying calm amid loud noises like sirens and honking cars. Though not officially a seeing eye graduate, Rocco demonstrated remarkable aptitude for guiding Marianne in her day-to-day life. It was on a brisk afternoon in late autumn that fate would test their bond in a dramatic way. Marianne had just finished her shift at the non-profit office. She and Rocco were making their usual walk to the bus stop when a shrill siren cut through the chilly air. At first, Marianne assumed it was an ambulance or a police car. But then she smelled something acrid, a thick, chemical burn that made her eyes water. The sidewalk erupted into shouts and frantic footsteps. Without sight, Marianne's confusion escalated. She gripped Rocco's harness, feeling the tension in his body. "Does anyone know what's happening?" she asked aloud, her voice trembling. She heard panicked voices shouting about a fire in a nearby building. The gusting wind carried plumes of smoke across the street, and Marianne coughed, her lungs protesting the acrid stench. Instinctively, she turned back the way they'd come, hoping to retreat to the safety of her office. But chaos had spread like wildfire. People were running, vehicles were honking incessantly, and the sidewalk felt like an obstacle course of frantic bodies. She pressed her hand to her mouth, trying to keep the smoke out. Her heart pounded so loudly that she could feel it in her ears. Rocco, sensing her fear, stepped closer. She commanded him, "Rocco, forward." Her voice, though panicked, carried a thread of trust in her partner's ability. The dog hesitated, scanning the environment. Thickening smoke and frenetic pedestrians pressed in from all sides. But Marianne maintained the handle of his harness, focusing all her energy on staying calm and trusting him. Rocco began moving, weaving through the crowd. He skirted left, avoiding a group of people shouting into their phones. He paused at an intersection, and Marianne could hear the screech of tires. She froze for a second, but Rocco stayed rigid, refusing to move until it was safe. Step by step, they navigated away from the worst of the smoke, searching for a place with fewer people and clearer air. Marianne coughed again, tears streaming from her sightless eyes as the harsh fumes scalded her throat. A wave of dizziness struck her, and she clutched Rocco's harness more tightly. He kept pulling her forward, guided by his keen nose and the training that had sharpened his instincts. Another block passed in tense, uncertain motion. Finally, the air became more breathable. They found an alley that was relatively calm, shielded from the surge of panicked foot traffic. Marianne leaned against a wall, trying to catch her breath. Her head spun. Rocco pressed close, whining softly. From behind, she heard an explosion-like sound, a backdraft, or maybe something structural collapsing. Her skin crawled at the echo of it. She knew they needed to get even further away. "Forward, Rocco," she whispered, her throat hoarse. Her legs trembled like jelly. Could he sense the urgency? She felt him begin to move, his pace controlled but deliberate, as if ensuring she wouldn't stumble. They continued for a few more blocks, guided primarily by Rocco's inner compass, until the roar of sirens and the cacophony of panicked shouts diminished into the distance. Finally, a kind passerby approached, realizing Marianne was alone and disoriented. They told her she was on a quieter street, away from the worst of the smoke. The voice belonged to a woman who offered her water and let her call Natalia from her phone. Marianne, her hands shaking, explained where she was. Within minutes, Natalia arrived, throwing her arms around Marianne in relief. In that moment, Marianne realized the full weight of what had happened. Rocco had guided her to safety through chaos, smoke, and fear. Despite not being a formally certified guide dog, he had drawn on his training and, more importantly, their bond to steer her away from danger. In the days that followed, local news outlets covered the fire, which had originated from a chemical storage area in a nearby building. It spread with alarming speed, causing extensive damage but, fortunately, limited casualties. Marianne's escape was a small footnote, one of many survival stories from that day, but for her and those who knew her, well, it was the centerpiece of something extraordinary. Rocco's actions transcended any question of certification or background. He had performed like a hero. Social media posts circulated among rescue groups and friends of Marianne, sharing how a once abandoned German shepherd had courageously led his blind companion out of the danger zone. The shelter where Rocco had stayed received an outpouring of attention, with people celebrating his story. Kevin, the volunteer who had found Rocco originally, posted a photo of Marianne and Rocco with the caption, "From abandoned to life-saving companion, this is the difference love makes." Marianne was inundated with calls from well-wishers. Some asked if she planned to do any interviews or if she wanted to highlight the importance of rescue dogs in a broader campaign. Though shy about the spotlight, Marianne agreed to do a small piece with a local newspaper, partly to champion adoption and partly to express her gratitude for Rocco. She spoke passionately about her journey and how trusting an abandoned dog had become one of the best decisions of her life. The event had rattled Marianne, but it also solidified her confidence in Rocco. She realized that their training was not just about mastering commands in controlled scenarios. It was about forging a partnership strong enough to endure real-world emergencies. And when that emergency came, Rocco had risen to the moment. His loyalty and quick thinking validated the hundreds of hours of practice and all the emotional energy they had invested in each other. People around Marianne noticed a new glow in her demeanor. She walked with a heightened sense of assurance, leaning a bit less on her cane and a bit more on Rocco's harness. For his part, Rocco seemed proud, his ears often perked, his stance more self-assured. He still had the same gentle nature, but there was a subtle new aura about him, as if he understood he was truly needed and cherished. To honor Rocco's heroic deed, Daniel and Natalia organized a small gathering in the backyard of Natalia's home. Close friends, family, and a few staff members from the animal shelter were invited. They called it a hero's thank you. A simple barbecue was set up, complete with a dog-friendly cake, more a big loaf of peanut butter and carrot mixture, and Rocco wore a playful bandana printed with little paw prints. Marianne gave a short speech, her voice trembling with emotion. She recounted the day she first met Rocco in the shelter, how she sensed something special in his gentle behavior, and how, despite her doubts and fears, she chose to adopt him. She spoke of their journey, the tough days in training, and the triumph of forging a partnership grounded in trust. At the end of her speech, tears glistened in her unseeing eyes as she bent down to run her hands lovingly over Rocco's neck. "You saved my life," she said, barely louder than a whisper. Rocco pressed his snout gently against her cheek, as if to say, "I'll always be here for you." The moment was punctuated by applause, sniffles, and the bright hush that sometimes follows an outpouring of genuine emotion. Even those who had initially doubted the wisdom of training a rescue dog as a guide admitted that witnessing Rocco's transformation had reshaped their perspective. Daniel, in a rare display of sentiment, placed a comforting hand on Marianne's shoulder and said, "You two have redefined what it means to believe in possibility." I've trained many dogs in my time, but it's not every day I see this level of devotion. After the speeches, Kevin presented Rocco with an honorary service dog in training vest, embroidered with his name and a small patch that read, "Rescued and Proud." Marianne clutched the vest, her fingers gliding over the textured letters, tears slipping down her face in gratitude. The vest represented more than a mere accessory. It was a testament to Rocco's journey from abandonment to belonging, from despair to purpose. Life gradually settled back into a comfortable rhythm, but Marianne and Rocco had been irrevocably changed by their experience. Their walks around the neighborhood carried new significance. On weekends, Marianne ventured beyond her usual routines, taking Rocco to farmers' markets, visiting nearby parks with Natalia, and even attempting to navigate local hiking trails with Daniel's guidance. Each new experience felt like an opportunity to celebrate their bond. Rocco's training never truly stopped. Daniel continued to refine and expand his skills, preparing him for additional scenarios and commands that might prove useful in Marianne's everyday life. Yet, even as Rocco's abilities grew, Marianne realized that her own trust and confidence had grown in tandem. She learned how to read his subtle body language, the tension in his shoulders when he was unsure, the shift of his weight when he was about to guide her around an obstacle, the slight tug on the harness that meant be careful. Their shared language was a tapestry of gentle tugs, spoken commands, and an unspoken emotional rapport. In moments of introspection, Marianne pondered the unpredictability of destiny. She had once resigned herself to waiting for the perfect guide dog from the seeing eye, never imagining she'd adopt a shelter dog with a troubled past. She had never thought she'd be caught in a life-threatening situation, relying on his steady guidance. Yet here she was, stronger and more self-assured than ever. The bond between them had become a symbol of resilience, a testament that broken things can mend, that lost souls can find each other, and that a partnership forged in adversity can shine brighter than any challenge life throws in their path. When Marianne spoke to others about her story, she often mentioned that the rescue which saved Rocco was part of the ASPCA network. She explained how volunteers like Kevin scoured abandoned warehouses and alleys, searching for animals that might otherwise perish unnoticed. She recounted how the staff nurtured Rocco until he was healthy and rehabilitated, and how destiny placed him on the path to become her companion and guide. People were moved not just by the story, but by the undeniable love that radiated from Marianne whenever she touched upon her journey with Rocco. In time, Marianne began volunteering her own spare moments to help with fundraisers for animal shelters and to speak at local community centers about the potential of rescue dogs. While not every dog could or should become a service animal, she wanted to show that many rescues have untapped potential, waiting for a chance and the right environment to flourish. Whenever she spoke, Rocco would sit quietly by her side, ears alert, as if understanding the importance of every word. Though Marianne could not see the audience's reaction, she felt their attentive silence, and she sensed Rocco's silent pride. Their story spread slowly but steadily, carried by word of mouth, social media, and the occasional community newsletter. The blind woman and the rescued German shepherd became a local legend of sorts, a heartwarming reminder that goodness can be found in unexpected corners of life. People who met Marianne and Rocco on the street would often whisper with awe, "That's them," and wave hello. Marianne would smile and wave back, never fully knowing where they were in the crowd, but trusting that their hearts were in the right place. The journey was far from over. Marianne still had many hopes, perhaps, to travel out of state on her own with Rocco, to climb a mountain trail with Daniel's supervision, or even to write a memoir about her life and how Rocco had shaped her understanding of courage and loyalty. Yet she embraced these dreams with open arms, confident that whatever trials might arise, she and Rocco would face them together. They had proven they could triumph over shadows and find refuge in each other's presence. And it was this spirit that continued to guide them forward into the grand tapestry of life, where the future was unwritten but brimming with promise. And so ends the unforgettable story of a resilient blind woman and the abandoned German shepherd who became her steadfast guide. Their journey speaks volumes about the power of trust, the miracle of second chances, and the unbreakable bond formed when two souls decide to face life side by side. Rocco's extraordinary act of bravery reminds us that love can emerge from the darkest places, illuminating paths where once there was only doubt. If this story touched your heart, please don't hesitate to like this video, share it with friends who believe in the transformative power of love and hope, and subscribe for more uplifting tales. Each click is a nod to countless abandoned animals longing for a home and to people yearning for an extra spark of inspiration. Together, we celebrate these incredible connections that remind us no challenge is insurmountable when we're guided by love.